Welcome back to the Coach Steve Show. We are going to continue on today with our simple 3-4 defense. Hopefully, you coaches, young coaches, youth coaches, guys just want to look at the 3-4, different thoughts, are getting something out of it. So, we're going to continue on with our simple 3-4 defense. Please make sure you hit the like button and the subscribe button on the YouTube channel. Please follow it and rate it. Leave a comment in the comment section down below. Go on iTunes, Apple, Spotify, rate it, and all that good stuff. Please and thank you. Thank you for everyone that has done so or listened or watched. I appreciate all of you. Send me a message at coach_Steve72 on Twitter. Email at coachsteveshow@gmail.com and all of that good stuff. So we're going to continue on with our simple 3-4 defense. Today, we're going to talk about stunts. We're going to talk about stunts up on your D line and how they can also maybe incorporate some of the stunts with your linebackers. So let's dive into some stunts that I have done or seen in the simple 3-4 defense. So again, you want to label guys that are going to be label the guys in a way that your players are going to be able to remember. But when I was around the 3-4, we also labeled them to where we can maybe use those names with those letters in this for our stunts. So how we would label is the nose is always the nose. Then we would have our stud, and then we would have you could call it a tackle or anything else on the backside. You could call it your whip. You could call it anything you want. But let's talk about some stunts. So we would try to name them with the letters that they started with. So if you wanted your nose and your stud to stunt, you could call it one or two things. We would call it NOS. So if you called it NOS, like in Fast and Furious, that it turned on the NOS. That told us that since it started with the N for the nose, he was going first. And then the S for the stud, since it ends in NOS with the S, he was the one going. So if the nose was, and this would go towards, that side. So if the nose knew that the stud was there, he was probably towards the strength. So right now, this would be a Ray, or, right, anything you want to call it. In this 3-4, he would go first. So instead of going to the A gap, he was coming around and trying to get to this B gap. This would tell the Sam or the stud he was coming around and getting the A gap. Now, when you do this stunt, it's very hard for the nose to come all the way around to the C gap, which you obviously can because you're trading responsibilities. We would have it go for the B gap, and then we would have the stud go for the A gap, which told us that this outside linebacker is still a C gap defender in the run game. So you could do it that way, or just have the nose goes first. So he would loop in and aim here, aim here. We would attack people a lot on the line of scrimmage. So this would go here. So this type of stunt for us would have been NOS, since it starts with an N, ends with an S. It lets us know who goes first and where, and trying to trade responsibilities or just try to get to the next gap. If we wanted to stunt with the other side in this look, and we wanted the T to go first, so you could have your stud, and then the other guy could just be a tackle, could be an end. You could go tan, so we would call tan, and this would tell us that the tackle was going first, so he's coming around for A gap. The end's at the end, so he's running around aiming for there. And the laser has to know he's the one that's going to help with the C gap. And then, like I said, in a four even man front, you have to really make sure they're getting to those gaps, because you may not necessarily have another guy outside helping out with the C gap. In the 3-4, you have guys helping out. So tan, he would go first, and then the nose would come looping in around. These are longer stunts, but it keeps it simple for the kids when you name them the nose, name them the tackle, name them the stud, and you're labeling these names in this fashion where they're able to understand, oh, it's TAN, T goes first and goes last. Just another stunt to help out with this. So this would be tan. If you want the nose and the tackle now, with to stunt with the nose going first, you could call this a net. Starts with an N, ends with a T. So it's telling now it looks exactly the same from before, except now the nose is going first, tackles looping around and ending in here. So this would be net, staying with that same simple principle that you're telling those guys to go first. So if you signal it in like with NOS, we're turning something like a knob, like you see on Fast and Furious, tan, you're hitting your arm because you're tan, like you can see on the video. If you're watching the video, we're all sunburned. So tan and then net, you could go like net because you're messing with a net or a fishing, net or anything like that to make sure that it's simple and able to signal it in. So this type of stunt up in this 3-4 would be called a net. To stunt the stud first before the nose, you would just go sun. So if this is tan, you could go sun or sun. You could signal it however you want. So now your stud would be going first. Now he's looping in real hard and he's coming around. You could have him be for the C gap. A lot of times we would aim for shoulder and players, so they're aiming here. Your outside linebacker still got to help out with C gap responsibility, knowing that this is happening. And when this is happening, your Mike linebacker knows if you're aiming for C gap, now the gap has moved. He's getting A gap. He's probably going to have B gap or he's going to have C gap, depending on what you decide. We would try to have it go all the way to the C gap so that way the Mike gets there. But depending on what type of nose guard you have, it may only have to be, hey, he's coming in hard for the A gap. He's coming for the C gap. Mike's eyes are peeking to the C gap. But you also have your razor out here. But if he's dropping back into coverage for something, your Mike still has to scrape over the top and get to the C gap. So these are just simple stunts that we would have with our defensive line with a 3-4 for our N, for our nose, S for stud, T for the tackle. You could use an E, but there was, to me, better names that you could use with the N and the T. You can also stunt with your linebackers. You can do it with your defensive line or linebackers with linebackers. So, for example, in a previous video, I said you always had the R and the M's for razor and your mic travel together because there might be names associated with them to help them stunt. So one that we would use would be called Ram. So you could go Ram, and that told you, well, it starts with an R. He's going first. So in this front, let's say you're having the nose guard slant to the strength. So he has A gap. The mic then is responsible for B gap, and you have your stud out there for C gap, but you also have the razor out there helping C gap, D gap responsibilities. So if you decide to stunt here and Mike has B gap, the R would go first and he's got the B gap. The Mike loops around and has responsibilities out in the C gap, D gap area because you have called Ram. So the R would go first. That's why we always had them travel together. So that way you could call these mixed stunts here because it always shows, oh, Mike's got that first. Or the R, has out here. Well, now the R is coming looping in and he's coming around to the outside. So for this one, we would call it Ram. That's why we have our razor and our Mike always travel together. The other side with our laser and our will, or you could call it a SAM, but we would call this law. So you could like open a book like law. So L would be going first because it starts with an L. So now if Will has B gap responsibilities, he's looping in here, he's coming around farther out. So law would tell the laser he was going first. Then the will is coming around him. You could come up with a word with a W. So you can go will, like we're writing a will. And so then telling us, okay, it's starting with a will. They're still changing responsibilities. So he's going first. He's coming around here. Now, you also can have different things happening up front. So if you have slant calls on, everything else, that determines where the B gap defenders are. So you could call a slant with your guys up here. So slant to the strength. So if you know they're slanting right, tackle's going inside for the B gap, nose is going for A gap. He's having the C gap. So you could go a 5-0-5 slant strong law, and it's telling up here, okay, they're slanting in here. We know the A gap is here. So now the will has to be out here for C gap protection. Laser's coming in really hard for this A gap, but also your Mike, he's looking at B gap, but he can scrape over whatever his keys are. And you would have these guys start to creep up also to make this happen. That's why we always had L and W travel together, have the R and M travel together, so we can make up those type of words. Then you have to incorporate the rest of those stunts up front. Slant is one of the most common ones. So slanting to the strength, and you could slant to the weak side. So if you decided to slant to the weak side here, so if it was 505, and when I say 505, talking about the techniques, you signal out ends, it could be 505. You could call 404 or 4I. That's how you could signal those stuff in. So if they're 505 and you go slant weak, so they're slanting to the weak side. So if the strength is Ray, because our R and our M are on that side. So they're slanting away. He's going C gap, nose guard's going A gap, your stud comes inside for the B gap. So if you went, 505, slant weak, ram for the stunts up here. So now you're getting those slant calls in. R's going first, so he knows he's going into the A gap. M's coming around for the C gap. We call it Mars. You could call it, mirror, because it ends with an R. So like mirror, because we're seeing, ourselves. Like, oh, we don't want to see ourselves, so we're covering it up. So if that's the case, you could call this a slant weak. So 505 slant weak mirror, and this would tell the M, okay, he's going first, so he's looping really hard for the C gap. He's coming in hard for the A gap. The Will obviously can scrape over the top, but he has B gap responsibilities because of the way they're slanting inside. You can also have a pinch call attached to this. So a pinch call would be for your lineman. Everybody's going inside. The nose would just go toward the strength. So right now, if we were to flip flop this and it was a Lulu call, for the strength, they flip sides. The mic is traveling with the razor, so they're flipping sides. So then you go pinch. So then if you go pinch, that's just telling our guys, hey, tackle's going inside, lose the strength, so he's going A gap. This guy's coming in for C gaps. They're all coming inside. That's their responsibilities. Now the nose probably just going to man up on the center, but he's got the A gap. So you could go, pinch ram here. So then that's telling the R or mirror. So you can go pinch mirror. And so, the M's coming out here. He's coming in really hard for the A gap. Vice versa. You want to go ram. He's coming in really hard first. He's looping around out there. Different stunts here you could do up front with your defensive linemen and your linebackers. They all work together. And that's why we loved giving the outside guys an R and L to come up with those words. You can come up with whatever you want, but this was just a simple way for us in the 3-4 defense. And there you go. Those are some of the stunts with the simple 3-4 defense. There's other ones you could do with your defensive linemen and your linebackers. You could have entitled different things with your defensive linemen and your linebackers. So a simple way to do it would be to try to make sure that you have a word that associates those guys just blitzing. You have a word for those guys to stunt, X across Texas type stunt where they're crossing. For us, it was the simple way would just be to have names associated with their the way they're labeled. So your laser, your razor, your mic, and your wills. And to me, that was the simplest way to do it. You could do whatever you want. You can label them however you want. But we like the words. Can you come up with signals? Like I said, ram and everything else. Put your two hands on your head. Nos, you're churning something like on Fast and Furious. So whatever you come up with, those are just simple ways for me in the 3-4 and those stunts. And that wraps up this episode. Thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. Send me a message at Coach_Steve72 to be on the podcast or just talk some ball. Coach Steve Show at gmail.com. Send something there. Like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow and rate it. Go on iTunes and Apple and all that good stuff and do all that. Leave a comment in the comment section down below. Check out all the affiliates in the description below. Thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. This is Coach Steve, and we will see you next time.